Okay, well, we are about 1 minute after the hour. We're going to get started shortly. But first of all, I just wanted to say congratulations to everybody for making it to Thursday of this week.
Yes.
I feel like the week has gone by pretty fast, but it is nice to spend some time with you all over this really important topic. Today, we're going to be talking about LGBTQIA plus conversations to have before the baby. Um, and really, what many of our queer patients and colleagues and friends wish they had really talked about sooner. So I'm going to take a brief moment to introduce myself, and then Jackie will introduce herself as well. And we'll go from there. So my name is Dr. Cecil Webster. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and an adult psychiatrist, as well as a psychoanalyst, and the founder of Webster Clinic here, a psychiatric practice where we do lots of psychotherapy and medication management, all sorts of things, but really where we try to center many people at the margins to include our queer communities. And we have
Hi, I am Jackie, otherwise known as Dr. Buchanan, and I'm a child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist at Webster Clinic.
wonderful. So we're going to get started. There are some very basic things that we often ask, like we're often we are asked. It's like, okay, well, like, my husband and I, my spouse and I are engaged with a IVF clinic or a surrogacy agency. There's like some screening. We they ask us questions about this, like, what is all this discussion about, like conversations before the baby that has nothing to do with that? Like, what's the difference between what we're talking about and what they do?
Great question. Yeah. I think the surrogacy agencies and fertility clinics do an excellent job, oftentimes, of helping couples work through the mechanics of creating baby, kind of the medical aspects, and even connecting folks with legal resources that might be helpful.
Hmm.
And, the conversations about family building for queer and trans intended parents are really complicated and speak to our values and hopes and fears. And there are a lot of decision points and feelings that come up, and a lot of players involved.
Complicated feelings with family planning. Yeah, I can imagine. So I think there are some really important and special considerations that we have. There will be a number of things that we will touch on today. Also, near the end, we will address some of the Q&A that will also pop up as well for any of the direct questions that you all may have. But why don't you give us a brief overview, Dr. Buchanan?
Absolutely. So, there we're going to talk today about the kinds of factors that complicate decision making for LGBTQIA plus family building. So these are things like our own stuff. What do we bring into our relationship, and how does that affect our partner and their reaction to it? Do we get caught up in a particular dance around it? What are the dynamics there? And even dynamics within our families of origin can come into play in these kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
So it's important to be able to recognize. We'll talk about that today, what a conflict in yourself or in your partner might look like, or dynamics in the couple or
Yeah.
family of origin.
There are loads of questions. In short, loads of questions. We have lots of questions around like how all this stuff works. Here's some examples of some of the stuff that we will touch on. You don't need to memorize it, but just know that there are lots of questions out there about like how all of this stuff works and how you and your partner, you and your spouse, whomever, might engage with this. This is also especially relevant to individuals that are having children on their own as well. We never want to leave that group out too. So, shall we?
Let's do this.
All right.
So LGBTQA plus intended parents face many, many more decision points. And it's a lot. It is overwhelming. It can be so scary for intended parents about the number of decisions that needs to be made and how complex each decision can be. It can kind of carry multiple layers of meaning for each person in the couple, or the families of origin. So, for example, even just a question around, well, whose genetics are we going to use to create this baby?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of other questions come up about that.
Right. I've had many couples say things like, well, you don't like cilantro. It tastes like soap to you. Do we really want that for our child?
valid question. And perhaps even harder to answer are things like, do I want to use my genetic material or my partner's genetic material? Do we want to use a donor? Do we want the donor to have a genetic relationship to one of us so that there will be a genetic relationship with the child? Or do we want to go with a friend or an anonymous donor? And how might other people react to this? And how much do we want to factor that into decision making?
Everybody always has an opinion. So there's often a lot that goes into these decision makings. If there is a genetic donor, like an egg donor or a sperm donor or the like, there can be lots of questions around like how similar or how different would we like that person to be to one of us or myself. There are a lot of different ways in which every step of these processes requires some extra decision making, which oftentimes in cisgendered and heterosexual couples, like these questions are often absent.
Yes, yeah. And even questions like who will carry the pregnancy can be so complicated, both in terms of whether there will be a surrogate and would that be like a friend or a family member? And is that too much to ask someone to do?
It's a big ask.
It's a big ask. And even like for maybe a trans intended parent, do I feel comfortable going through this with my body to sort of create a baby, or would it be more comfortable to have my partner or a surrogate do this? And also for couples in which either could kind of carry the pregnancy, well, who's going to do that? And what does that mean if we're dividing and splitting the roles of, motherhood, for example? And what does reciprocal IVF mean in that context when maybe when mom's egg is used, the other mom carries a pregnancy? And how might other people understand and react to this? And how do we want to talk about this with other people?
All that is to say, it is very complicated. There's lots of different language that people use around this. There are lots of different ways in which people can build families. But the important part is like we're often not critically talking about these in fundamental ways. Your surrogacy agency, your IVF clinic, they will help with the legal processes, as Dr. Buchanan had mentioned. They will certainly help with the logistics, but they don't often get into like, okay, well, not being pregnant, what does that feel like in terms of your relationship to motherhood? Not having a genetic relationship or having a genetic relationship with this child, how does that influence your sense of maternity, paternity, closeness, distance, and all of that? So those are some important questions that are often missing. We tend to spoiler alert, we tend to avoid the things that we're comfortable with. We certainly have a lot of that here at Webster Clinic when it comes to all sorts of things like psychotherapy, etc. But it's just a general human trait of ours. We tend to avoid stuff that's like complicated or uncomfortable.
And another conversation that's really easy to avoid, because it can get kind of complicated and messy pretty quickly, is race and ethnicity.
Yeah.
How much do you want your own race and ethnicity or your partners to be reflected in your child or children? And what if there is a discrepancy in the race and ethnicity of your child because of a donor? And how are you going to foster their racial and ethnic identity development? And how are you going to explain this to other people? And what about the homophobia and racism and the intersection between those things that can sometimes occur, for example, in families of origin? And that might complicate this whole process.
I think Wanda Sykes, the comedian, a Black comedian from Washington, D.C., I have to represent that a little bit. She and her wife have like a number of kids. They're really cute, I hear. And her French wife and she have white children. It's a big part of her stand-up routines, like her white kids and like how people react to that, what it's like in the airport or restaurants, what does the family think? Like so this is a consideration. Granted, she does it very well with comedy. I'm going to be a lot less graceful than she is in that way. But there are all sorts of ways in which aspects of race and ethnicity and connectedness really come up.
I literally just watched the one.
Oh, you did?
New. I love that you brought that up. And it's out on Netflix for anyone who wants a good laugh.
Yes.
Not that we're advertising for one.
Comfortable with that.
She's pretty great. Probably my favorite comedian of all time. And then some more things that can get kind of complicated and messy are sort of decisions about the costs incurred and who's going to pay for them. And It can be expensive, right?
Yes, even more than emotional cost, there is financial cost as well. Lots of stuff can be very expensive. It's not guaranteed. There are often multiple cycles, multiple tries, multiple hospital or clinic visits, multiple rounds of things in unpredictable ways. It can be very expensive.
Very costly and sometimes disproportionately costly for kind of male-bodied intended parents who sometimes are in the position of asking, if they have the capacity of families of origin for financial support. And then what does that mean for sort of like their relationships with the children, how much influence or boundaries are upheld? It can get tricky.
If you thought that your parents paying for college was going to be complicated in your decision making around that, just imagine how it might play out with their grandchildren.
Yeah, and sometimes it can even be akin to like a down payment of a home, the
Yeah,
cost of this of having one child. And a lot of, if people with the means might have the good fortune of having families help, but then what does it mean to have families help with this specific thing? Does that make sense or not for somebody?
absolutely. Lots of power dynamics.
Yes, yes. And I think another really big topic is sort of what kind of relationship do you want your kid or kids to have with the donor or surrogate? Um, and how might you talk to other people about this? How much contact do you want them to have? What do you feel comfortable with? What if there's a disagreement between what you and your partner feel? I mean, that could be the case for any of these questions. And how do you navigate
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. How do you navigate it at the pediatrician's office? How do you navigate it in the grocery store or with your inappropriate cousin over Thanksgiving? How do you navigate it with your child's like classmates when they ask about like, well, who's like, how did like, where's Billy's dad or where's Billy's mom?
Yes. And, that's another major player potentially in your child's life or in your life. And, it's another person that you want to be thoughtful with about sort of boundaries and standards sometimes even.
Right. Which gets to the next point of it's always really important to consider in advance how do you want to talk to your children and talk to your family about the ways in which your children have come about, like the story of the creation of your family.
This is another one that I think can be really easy to avoid and not necessarily intentionally. I think a lot of queer and trans parents have good intentions to have these conversations with their kids, and it requires a lot. Like it requires kind of sorting through your own understanding of all of the above questions and more.
Hmm.
And then not only figuring all that out, but then figuring out how to communicate about it in a developmentally appropriate way.
Oh yeah. How do you how do you explain reciprocal IVF to a 4-year-old? How do you explain surrogacy to a 9-year-old? How do you walk through what that stuff is? There are some children books out there, not a whole lot, that can be of great aid, but oftentimes I will hear that queer families talking with each other how they did it for their own children, which is, a great queer tradition is being able to have intergenerational transmission of information and experience and desire, of course. But talking to your kids and your family about this journey is vital.
Yes.
Don't avoid it.
Don't avoid it. So with all that being said, what do we do about this? So uh, this is a lot of uncharted territory for
Absolutely.
intended parents to navigate. And there's not a traditional pathway forward. There's sort of an infinite number of ways to create a family as an LGBTQIA individual.
Which leads to what we say oftentimes in psychiatry, which leads to a big cognitive load.
Yes. A big cognitive load, and it can be an emotionally exhausting journey as well. And already creating a family for in the best of circumstances can be an emotionally exhausting process.
Right. There's so much joy and hopefulness, and we can hold our future families creatively in our minds. We can imagine a lot, and also so much logistics, so much paperwork. so much having to decide things, so much having to do things that like there isn't a lot of like there isn't a big well-worn path around culturally or like socially.
Exactly. And a lot of times when we're overwhelmed, when we're avoiding things and we have a lot of decisions to make, it's just human nature to go on autopilot a little bit,
Yeah,
to, sort of like decide things in the way that we typically do, or not necessarily work through all of the stuff that might be getting in the way and affecting our decisions. And so, if we're not intentionally thinking about how we want to make decisions, we run the risk of kind of being unduly influenced by these other factors.
absolutely. Yes, yeah. What does that look like? What does that sound like, Dr. Buchanan?
Yeah, let's get more into it, because I think
Sounds good.
basically it's our stuff with our partner and our stuff with our family growing up. So what does that specifically look like? And how does one, if it's our stuff or if it's our partner's stuff, how do you even recognize that? And what does that even mean? What is a personal conflict? It's a situation in which somebody feels torn or has mixed feelings about something they want or value, or like things that other people are demanding of them.
Absolutely. I will say one thing about that. Conflict can look a lot of different ways. Conflict can look a lot of different ways. We're not always like smashing plates in the streets, but it might look like not engaging in these conversations, in these questions, in this discomfort, not engaging with the questions of like like what are my preferences for an egg donor or sperm donor? How does that differ than yours? How do we figure that out? What do I tell my grandmother? How do I understand like what my dad might want since he's paying for things? Like there's all sorts of layers here. Conflict can look like avoidance. If you hear nothing else today, please hear that.
Yeah, it's an important theme for today for sure. So let's just break it down. What's an example of a personal conflict? So let's say Bob, was building a family, and with his partner, and he could care less about whether he has a biological connection to the child, but his dad really wants him to, and he's torn. Like he doesn't know if he wants to kind of follow his own preferences, uh, or please his father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's plenty of times where we always, not always, there are plenty of times where we want to exist positively in the imagination of our own parents and want to please them in what we imagine they might want from us.
Yeah, and that touches on themes of kind of dependence, on our caregivers when they were our caregivers, versus kind of our own autonomy and individuality, like from them and following that. Other things that might be, related to a personal conflict are like these perfectionistic tendencies and really wanting to get it right and over analyzing.
I don't know, Dr. Buchanan, I don't know if any of our audience members out there, queer folks particularly, might recognize
It never
perfectionism or
happens in the
complication.
queer
Yeah,
trans community.
yeah,
No,
yeah, new
that's
territory,
a
perhaps.
thing. Yeah.
I'm being a little facetious. Obviously, this is something that is also very much related to the queer experience in America and elsewhere, of course.
Yes. And also, I think it could sometimes be human nature to both simultaneously deeply desire something and be terrified of it. And sometimes that ambivalence can lead to these, not necessarily consciously, but underneath the surface, stall tactics.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of this. It's my favorite hand motion in this clinical office. Yep.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so that's what it might look like. How do you recognize it though? How do you know? One of you in the couple or in the relationship constellation might be very stuck. That's like a person in there is really stuck on a particular decision.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might be having these like really repetitive conversations between that person and their family of origin and the partner, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Avoidance, we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so having like a the same list of candidates that you are continually going over but not making much headway on, and then it's been weeks
Mm-hmm.
and then months and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe years.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
avoidance is
Literally.
something special.
It is. And I think also the sort of anxiety or depression type mental health challenges can also signal an underlying personal conflict.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier about some of the ways in which this can mirror the coming out process
Mhm.
for many LGBTQIA folks as well.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, like we have something, we might get stuck, we avoid coming out, even though we know very well there are aspects of us that feel different or not typical at times. And it can just be really hard to like actually engage with it. So this is a very similar thing. People might have those strings plucked in a very similar way emotionally. It's like, oh, here's that. This feels like when I was younger, and I'm not sure why. Well, that might be one of the reasons why.
Absolutely. So how about recognizing a couple dynamic and what does that even mean? So this repetitive interaction, this dance between members of a couple or relationship constellation that really shapes the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So an example there is uh, Siobhan, who is really like used to like letting her wife have her way, and her
Mm-hmm.
wife wants to carry this baby. Her
All
wife is
right.
like afraid of not having that biological connection, and what if the child doesn't love her as much? She's a little insecure.
Okay, Siobhan has some important considerations.
Yeah, so Siobhan's like, it's typically easier. She gets like really irritable when she's anxious. Let's just go with what she wants. Like, let's just do that. That's our autopilot. Let's go for it. And then months later, her wife is in her third trimester, and then something small happens, and Siobhan just snaps. She is upset. And she realizes, like, I didn't even get to consider if I wanted to be pregnant. And what if I did? And now we're already doing this. Like, my goodness.
Mm. So you've got one partner outpacing another, one partner needing accommodation, the other accommodating. Yeah, that's a big recipe for disaster. Using that dance metaphor, it's like you could have like a very tight tango where there's a follower, a leader, but there's very much like a cohesive dance happening, or it could be a breakdance battle. I've never been good at that, but I hear it's really hard.
Let's see that. I want to
Let's
see
do
that. Yeah.
I don't think these bones are going to make that happen, but okay.
Yeah. So how do you know how like if that's all well and good, Dr. Webster, but how do you know if you're actually like having this experience of a couple dynamic? You might both have a lot of difficulty making a decision together. You might not talk about certain things that need to be spoken about to make a
Mm,
decision.
mm.
Or there might be just this like air tension or overt fighting. Um,
Fighting over things that have nothing to do with
yeah,
what the actual tension is about. I
yeah.
don't know if people recognize that as well. You're fighting over taxes, you're fighting over not getting a ripe cantaloupe, and it's like this has nothing to do with a cantaloupe.
Yeah, and you might be kind of stuck in your roles in the relationship. So like in the context of like all this decision making, maybe one person is like, "Hey, we need to make a decision. Let's go. Let's do this." And the other
Hmm.
person is like running away because
Yeah.
that's their dynamic, and that's going to lead to a lot of like not making decisions.
Right. Yeah. 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 There's that stuckness avoidance again.
Absolutely. So, how about a family of origin dynamic? That one could be really tricky. What is that? Similar to the couple thing? It's a repetitive interaction
Hmm.
between family members that shapes relationships.
Hmm.
So, let's say Miguel's father is financially assisting him and his husband in their family
Okay.
building journey.
All right. So Miguel's dad is helping out.
It's helping. That's
Okay.
that's great,
Money,
right? That's
family
great.
dynamics. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. So Miguel and his husband, they wouldn't be able to afford to have a baby in this way otherwise.
Hmm.
So Miguel's father has a lot of opinions.
Oh,
He is not shy about expressing his opinions.
as a father with many opinions, I can relate. All right.
Yeah, yeah. And he asks that Miguel's sister be an egg donor because, Miguel's husband is going to use his sperm to create their baby. So he wants that genetic connection too.
So he's inserting his preference in this couple's decision making
Mhm.
using some of that finance as leverage.
Exactly. And Miguel, he's worried about saying no because then what if they lose the financial support and can't create a family?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also pleasing dad is important for many people.
Yes, totally. And a lot of these things, let me just say, that's can overlap, like whether it's personal
Sure,
stuff or family stuff.
sure.
Um, and so other, ways that this can look are, yeah, kind of caregiving, that emotional caregiving of a parent can
Hmm.
make it really hard to go against what they might want.
Yeah.
Um, even competitive sibling rivalry
Hmm.
dynamics.
Hmm. That can
Let's
happen.
say there's a sibling that's, trying to have a baby, but you want to have the first grandchild.
I won't be second again.
Yeah. And what does that look like in this context?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be making some quick decisions and maybe like not putting enough thought into them or like
Yeah.
thinking about the implications. So whether they're decisions that are in line with your values and your partner's values.
Yeah, yeah. And there's another dynamic that happens. Uh, this is specifically in couples that are married or partnered, but your in-laws or in-law equivalents, like it's a lot easier to say no to your in-law than it is to your father or mother or
Oh,
parent.
yes. Oh, yes.
It's a lot easier to have tension with your in-laws versus having tension with your
Mhm.
mother or father or parent.
As you're saying this, I hadn't considered that both family of origin, in theory, could come into intense conflict. And then what do you do? That can get real complicated.
Certainly quite messy. Not that we're not used to that here. Yeah.
So, with all that said, why are we talking about this? Why does it help? Why do we care?
Yeah.
Well, recognizing these things can improve the decision making process, lead to smoother decision making.
Yeah. You can't change what you don't see.
Yes. So if you can recognize it, that often makes it possible to separate out the conflict or the dynamic from that actual decision that needs to be made. I think like a lot of times we see that the decision itself comes
Mhm.
to represent something bigger. It's like the dishes that you're squabbling
Right.
over.
It's like, see, you don't listen to me. You're like, okay, well, we just have some dishes in the sink. That's
Right.
not quite the same thing as
Yeah.
not listening to you as a person.
It's like who's going to carry this first child can be like a make it or break. It can feel so high stakes in the
Hmm.
moment because it might mean something about a family dynamic.
Yeah.
So if you're able to say, "Oh, that's just a family dynamic," that's like this decision is a little bit smaller than that big problem. It's not insignificant, but it's a different thing.
Yeah. And it might allow somebody to say, oh, this is the dynamic. And they can either continue to participate in it, but be aware of it, or step outside of it and allow something else to happen.
Exactly. And oftentimes, if you can recognize what's happening, you can make a plan to address it. And if you're not able to make a plan, I think it's important to know when additional help might be needed. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we could all use that at times. Yes.
Yes. And this really allows you, when you've addressed the issue separately, separated it out, you can really then begin to actually think about what are the values that are important to you in this process and what
Hmm.
about for your partner, and come into alignment as a couple around
All
making a
right.
decision.
So we're moving into the green. That sounds great.
Moving into the green, yeah. um and I think this allows you to make an intentional decision freed from these conflicts in alignment with your values. And oftentimes people find that when they go through this process, it opens up additional pathways that hadn't been previously considered that might actually be even more in alignment with everyone's values in the couple.
Absolutely. So if you get good at one thing, you can get good at another. If you can make a great decision about um, who's going to carry the child, for example, then it might be easier to decide, like, okay, well, what like faith tradition are we going to raise our kid? Or like, what language are we going to speak at home? Like, whatever it might be. And if you do one thing, other stuff becomes easier.
That's right. um
Actually, maybe with the exception of one thing, sometimes names are hard.
Names are hard. Actually, yeah, I could have a whole story about that. I will not get into that. That will be for another day.
I'm
Another
sure
day.
people
Yeah,
have had their own conflicts
yeah,
about it.
it can be.
Yes.
That was something I avoided. But anyway. So what are some signs that you might need additional support? I think it's good to know when to need extra help. A lot of people need extra help. That's good to get it. So how do you know what kind of help do you need? What might, like, how do you know if what you're experiencing rises to the level of needing help?
Mm. So, like, when is it not enough just to chat with your partner or with yourself, perhaps? Or when Claude AI or Open AI or any of that other stuff, like when that falls flat, or when like Google searches are just not cutting it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So you might see that one or both of you, or whoever in the relationship constellation, is kind of confused about why are you stuck or what's challenging. It's just not clear, like what's
Mhm.
going on. And in that case, for that person that's confused, individual therapy can be really helpful.
Hmm.
And also, sometimes even outside of that, and sometimes specific consultation around LGBTQIA family building is actually sufficient. You don't not need long-term treatment for some of
Hmm.
these things to really sort through like what's coming up for you that's making this stuck.
Okay. So, and maybe one partner really needs to get through whatever their issue with their dad is. Or it might be the couple needs just like a really well circumscribed, limited consultation on how to like do all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah. And how might you know if it's like a couple issue? Well, you might just have a lot of trouble communicating around decisions,
Hmm.
whether that's like the repetitive pattern dance, or whether you're avoiding the conversation, or whether you're just butting heads and fighting and getting stuck, or whatever the case may be. It's,
Hmm.
that communication difficulty around the decisions that's popping up.
Okay. So having somebody name what those cycles are or what that conflict is, or kind of being a referee, for lack of a better word, might also be very useful
Yeah,
if people
absolutely.
are getting stuck there. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
which couples therapy can be very helpful for. And sometimes that's not even really needed because a specific consultation around this can sort through that and identify dynamics and help the couple and kind of quickly address them.
Yeah, that's certainly been our experience here. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're noticing that just in the process of decision making with your partner that there are a ton of concerns just around like one or both like families of origin, whether that's like, oh, if we do this, like, my uncle's going to be pissed, or
Hmm.
like I think my sister's gonna like abandon me. It might not be that
Hmm.
extreme, but like there might be these themes of just like these other family members are just popping up into the conversation over and
Right.
over and over again.
Right.
That might be a time when family therapy, like with the involved individuals, oftentimes could be real helpful. And again, it might not be necessary. Specific consultation around LGBTQIA family building can
Right.
often be sufficient to address it. The other great thing about this kind of consultation is that you may have no clue, and that is often the case, frankly, about like where if it's a personal conflict, what the kind of dynamic is coming up.
Hmm.
And that is a really quick and effective way to sort through like what it is and quickly address it so that the decision making can move forward.
Proceed. Interestingly, I think that's probably the most valuable part of all of that consultative process. This allows for decision making to be quicker, more efficient, and more effective, and more sustaining for other areas of life as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some advantages of LGBTQIA plus family building, particularly when it's done with intentionality? The kind of intentionality I think that like self-reflection on these things can lead to, and also in some cases like having the specific consultation can be really helpful for.
Hmm.
So it can really lead to an increased sense of self-actualization. I
Yeah.
think that many new parents who want to be parents feel this way, and especially for like the queer and trans communities, it's like
Hmm.
so much harder to get to this point.
Yeah.
To be able to do so feels like a monumental achievement a lot of times.
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, it's really a head start for what's to come as a new parent to be able to think about these things in advance.
Oh my goodness. If I could say one thing, I would probably say say that. If you can figure out reasonably well how to have a deep, cohesive conversation of like, okay, what's important to me in a relationship with a surrogate, and like, how do I think ahead about that? Um, if you can have that conversation, then you can have a conversation about like child rearing. What's our style going to be? Are we going to be very permissive? Are we going to be the sort of parents that, more free range, very strict? What sort of parents are we going to be?
Yes. And it's way better to talk about that stuff before you're sleep deprived with a newborn crying all the time, right?
Oh my gosh, yes,
That's
flashbacks.
actually, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
going to be hard,
Yeah.
regardless of what. But, I think that like if you're having some hard conversations in advance, it makes it more manageable.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the imagination and the creativity that's involved in just creating the story of your family is beautiful. I mean, it's a challenge for many couples. It requires this ingenuity
Hmm.
and it requires working together, much like you will be doing as future co-parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Start that partnership off right. Know who you are as a functioning couple for those that are in couples or more or less. Like how do you make decisions? How do you make them efficiently, cohesively, and respectfully?
Yes. Yeah, and I think a really beautiful thing about this process is expanding the narratives about family, right? Like
Hmm.
you might even have find yourself in the position of having a bigger village because you have, I think the queer and trans community often has like a chosen family. Donors and surrogates can sometimes be a part of your village in important ways,
Hmm.
and that's beautiful.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's a story that you can be proud to share with your kids. Your kids are going to feel wanted and valued. You went through a lot of trouble to create this family.
Absolutely.
And that makes them feel important.
Yeah. Now, will it be when they are upset that you have not given them their important Game Boy or whatever is replay? I guess it's like Nintendo Switch at this point. Probably not in those moments of conflict. But yeah, like to know that your parents had dedicated time and attention and like having a great deal of intentionality, as we often say, can be very, very like there's nothing more valuable than knowing that you're existing in the mind of caring adults,
Yeah.
particularly your parents.
Yeah. And something that I think that we as a field think about in a negative lens of like the generational passing things along, sometimes that's negative things like trauma or what have you. But in this case, you're passing along a really beautiful legacy to
Yeah,
your family and to your kids. Let's say if they have kids, who knows? But this is a legacy around personal and relational freedom that you are valued and supported in being with who you want to be romantically and having the kinds of family relationships that are outside of the box, and that is a beautiful thing.
yeah. I was thinking the other day that I brought in some cookies to the office, as I sometimes do, but really shouldn't. Uh, but they were made by my son, and I was realizing that we were like going over like baking cookies in the same ways that like my dad taught me
Mm-hmm.
how to bake. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's like something that I get to like offer to my son in a really positive way. Now, does he want to wait for the cookies to bake all the time? No, we are waiting for frustration tolerance to really come online. But it is a really beautiful thing to be able to share something positive that we get as individuals with the children that we have.
Definitely 100%. I love that.
Yeah. Any of that? There we go. So well, I guess there are a number of things that if you hear anything today, please listen to. One, conflict can look like avoidance. Two, you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to have all the answers, but like probably the most important part is having the question, allowing yourself the freedom and the space enough to have important questions, and like to have it out loud with your partner, should you have one, partners perhaps, like being able to engage with other caring adults that are going to be involved in your kid's life and have some decision making capacities shared with you, like vitally, vitally important. Never worry alone, which is actually something that we often say here at Webster Clinic.
Yeah. And this is a little cliche, but you aren't alone. There are other people in have done this before. You're probably a pioneer for going through this process, and at the same time, there are people thinking about how to make this smoother for the next generations to come.
Absolutely. And now I see that we've got some questions up. So let me formally say we are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. So this is your chance to offer your thoughts, your questions, your ideas, the things that you've been noodling over and being like, is that right? How do I think about this or that? Like, this is your opportunity. So let us start with the first thing. Oh, I see some really good questions here. Somebody asks, in your experience, where do couples get stuck most often in this process? I've got some ideas about that. Dr. Buchanan, would you like to start us off?
Yeah. I think it can look really different for every couple, kind of individual.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, for some, it does come up like well before the baby arrives. And for others, it can actually even come up like, postpartum. It's like sometimes those big family dynamics can like you might avoid them or they might pass over like in all the decisions leading up, and then you do have a baby, and then boom, it's like your mother-in-law like is really into breastfeeding and did that and expects
Hmm.
that of you, but you like that's hard, that's painful, you have no interests, right?
Yeah.
And that can get really, so I think it can really vary, and it's important to think about um yeah, the whole kind of range.
I think another place, that's a beautiful answer, Dr. Buchanan. I think there are many spaces after a child is born that families get stuck. For example, breastfeeding, like, are we going to have our kid confirmed in the Catholic Church? Like, what about a bat mitzvah? Like, all those sorts of questions can come up later. I will say there's another big part where people get stuck. It's really before they've like met formally with like IVF clinics, surrogacy agencies, where they're like, hey, we've been together a while. I would like to be a dad, I think. I would like to be a mom. And that's kind of where the discussion ends. People will have a very awesome time on vacation or relaxing time over dinner, but strangely, that's not the conversation that's being had, even though it occupies a lot of like mental space. It's like, oof, I'm getting older. I don't know how I can stay up really late at night, being sleep deprived. That's often a place that people get stuck, like before the I'm going to use a wider word, like the terror of having to commit to details, meeting with people, signing forms, putting aside money, perhaps, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, because also there could be like an avoidance being stuck so early because there are a lot of daunting questions that
Mhm.
might be preferable not to face.
Hmm.
Like maybe it's scary to think about not having a genetic relationship with your child. And so maybe you just don't really want to like think through what this will like pragmatically look like.
Yeah. And using my psychotherapy, psychoanalytic mind as well, like oftentimes people will get stuck on ideas such as like, I don't want to become like my mother. I don't want to become like my father. And I
Yeah,
also want to become a parent. And like that tension is a place that they get stuck, it gets unarticulated, and that is exactly where it remains, not articulated. So that's another place people get
very good
stuck.
point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a great question. We could probably talk a long time about that.
Yeah.
Perhaps I will leave that one there for the time being. Perhaps I can come back as well. Another question. Oh, again, we invite, if you're just now joining us, this is the time that we're inviting people to ask questions that they might be noodling over, or maybe their partner might be noodling over. This is your time to ask that as well. We'd be happy to answer that or anything else. Another question that comes up: is there such a thing as too much preparation? Like, how do you know when it is all right? Like you've done all the talking that you need to, and it's time to move forward.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah.
So I recognize a lot in this question. I won't say how personally. Um, so I would actually look at that question. Like the question is like, how do you know when you've done enough talking and it's time to move forward? For some people, that question might be, I am impatient with my partner. And for other people, it's like, this is so important and valuable to me. It hurts me that my partner isn't at the same speed as I am. The question can have a lot of meaning, which is again one of the reasons why we offer to people like having the courage to ask a question is the probably the most important thing. The answer is not always so vital. But to the early part of that question, so even outside of like what is behind the meaning of that question, um, is there such a thing as too much preparation? Yeah, I guess, sure. Yeah, right. Like if the avoidance becomes the preparation, absolutely. If like you are getting stuck on the spreadsheets and like there are multiple tabs open at all times on your browser, you've talked about this ad nauseum, you have all of the books and everything that you can available to you, but you still haven't chosen an egg donor or sperm donor or a surrogacy agency. Yeah, that might be a sign. that might be a sign that perhaps like the preparation is really where one is placing the anxiety rather than just engaging with the anxiety and engaging with the process of moving forward.
I totally agree. I also think that sometimes, I think that what this question can sometimes get at is potentially an underlying personal conflict, which, becoming a new parent is a developmental step. Not that everybody needs to become a parent, certainly. That's
Hmm.
not an expectation. But for those that are interested in that, that's a big developmental change. And with any developmental change, there comes a loss of something before that. And so it could be too that a lot of preparation going into all of the decisions that need to be made and making sure that you're factoring in all of the millions of implications, could be taken to an extreme, and might reflect, yeah, an underlying ambivalence about what are you going to lose when you become a parent.
Absolutely. You know, well, that's actually a very good question that we should get back to. Like, where is it that people have worries about losing things as well? So there can be a lot within the idea of preparation. It can be like a defense, is what we often say in psychodynamic psychotherapy sort of world. It can also be really important and meaningful. Queer folks have always had to like be well organized and have a lot of information in order to survive well. So it can be lots of different things. But if you notice that it's taking a long time and things are stuck and you can't talk about something, that's often a sign that it's functioning in a different way and containing some anxiety. Yeah. So there's oh, this is okay. This is another really great question. Do you have any specific recommendations around how transparent parents should be with their child? Is there anything that you think is better left out? Yes. Right? Like no one wants to hear about like the night that their mom and dad like came together in a sexual congress. I literally heard that from a 17-year-old the other day. It was a
Yeah.
lot. No one wants to hear about that necessarily. Like there are some reasonable boundaries that we have
Mhm.
between adult thinking and patterns and like child problems and ideas.
Yeah.
So do they need to get into the nitty-gritty about like aspects of the IVF or aspects of the surrogacy? Probably not, especially if it's like highly technical, but they might need sort of broad stroke stuff. Like if there's a surrogate, like yes, like um Candace, like our surrogate, like yeah, she was kind of like the kangaroo that got to hold you in her belly for 9 months. And like we were so excited. We were all so excited to meet you when you were born. That's like a very developmentally appropriate way of organizing something like that for a very young kid. But no, you don't have to, I don't know any parent that tells them everything. And if you are telling your kid everything, give me a call. We have something to talk about. But yeah, you don't have to tell them everything. If there's some degree of like discomfort around some aspect of it, it's a reasonable thing to ask your spouse or partner or like really trusted person that might have also gone through a similar experience. There's a lot of groups out there for like gay dads or lesbian moms or trans families, for example.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also the answer to this question can look different for every kind of
Oh,
couple,
absolutely.
or individual going through this process. And I think to be able to answer this question requires kind of deep conversations or thinking. I'm thinking about solo parents too, who want to
Yes.
solo intended parents. Um, but and I think that yeah, there's not like necessarily a right or wrong answer. Of course, there might be like sort of, yeah, absolutely crossing some level of boundaries or like information that your kids may not need to know. And I think there are also like nuances in terms of like, well, why is it that you might be interested in sharing a certain thing? What's important
Hmm.
for you that your child know this, versus not sharing a certain thing. So I think that the conversations that might arise from the types of information that you'd like to share are very important to have.
Right. Are you sharing with your kid that you had 60 hours of labor? Um, it might be a reasonable thing because you just want them to know about the process. But if you're using that to say that you're really frustrated with them for not cleaning up their room, there might be a better choice than that, of course, right? So there's all different ways that we can engage with our decisions in all of this stuff. Um, Another question that often comes up, and I can see here today too, what does a couple that like is successful with all of this look like? What does that couple look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that can look different, right? Because again, there are an infinite number of ways to sort of like create a family in this way. A couple doesn't look like a couple that never has an argument or conflict come up or even a
Hmm.
major disagreement with when the baby comes. Like, things like how to help your child sleep or what they're going to eat can become sources of huge conflict. It might help to have these conversations in advance to navigate those challenges, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you're not going to face challenges.
Yeah. I will also say the couples and families that feel the most solid around this whole process are often organized and prepared, but flexible. Like the sorts that, like, if there's like a new cycle that's having to be done, they're not going to fall apart. They're like, oh, um, this is unfortunate, but this is where we are. Like, we'll adjust. Or like, oh, this is important to me, but this aspect feels really important to you. I'm willing to compromise on this because it's more meaningful for you than it is for me. So, like, having clear ideas of what's important and what's not, having a clear sense of what one might expect, but also having a great degree of humility in the process because something's going to go wrong,
Yes.
and having a great deal of flexibility around that. Not just giving in, but having some flexibility.
Yes. To basically build off what you're saying, I think that couples who are successful often anticipate that things will go wrong because they do. They often do. And there's, rarely a sort of quote unquote perfect fertility journey that exists in the world, right? Like things often go wrong. And so the couples that anticipate that might, in, garner some resiliency early in the process from having
Yeah.
to go through that. Because I think for LGBTQIA plus intended parents, um, there can be more experiences of grief and loss along the way to creating your family. And so when that is anticipated and handled and kind of discussed sort of openly, that
Hmm.
can lead to resiliency that kind of helps the couple along the journey.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I will also say, like, individuals in a couple or other constellations, like, when they know their partner's strengths and their challenges and can speak directly to those things without it having to be a fight or like a lot of defensiveness come up. Oftentimes that can be very helpful. I like, for example, I might hear um, one wife and a couple say, like, listen, I know that my wife is not really great at like a lot of paperwork and detail in that way. So I'm going to take on most of that, but we're both going to be involved with like all the legal aspects of this process. Like that's a way of like being able to speak about it, but like also speak about it in like in a more loving, generous way versus a derisive, defensive way. Like she can't do it. Like that's not going to be helpful. But if you can speak to it directly and have it be open and coming from a loving place, I often see that as like a big sign for success.
It's very helpful, I agree, to know yourself and your partner. And also, like, that it's just not always possible, for the average person. And it can be
Yeah,
very helpful to know what you don't know and
yeah.
what you can do to help yourself in that situation.
Absolutely. So, I wish we had time for all the questions all the time, but we will do this again. If you have any other questions, obviously, feel free to reach out to either Dr. Buchanan or myself here at the Webster Clinic. Um, I will say that like you all have really awesome questions. again, like the thing that we always love for the families that we care for, the intended parents that we care for, what we want them to always know is that you don't have to have it figured out. That's not a point of this or anything else. But we do want you to have a great ability to ask good questions of yourself and of your relationship, so you can be prepared and flexible with what's ahead.
Well said. Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
I think that's a wrap. Thank you
Ah,
all for
Could be
joining
here
us.
forever.
This was so fun.
Yes. We're having a great time. So again, reach out if you need. But in the meantime, I hope you all have enjoyed your lunch and your afternoon, perhaps. And we'll see you when we see you.
All right. Take care.